Hello, I am Annabeth Hayes. I'm from Nashville, Tennessee, and I'm the curator of decorative arts at the Tennessee State Museum. One of my favorite objects in the museum's collection is an ornate dresser made in 1889 by a black cabinet maker named Lewis Buckner. Today, Lewis Buckner is considered one of Tennessee's premier cabinet makers of the late 19th century. But before he rose to this prominence, Buckner was born enslaved in 1856 in Sevier County, which is located in rural East Tennessee. And while there is limited written evidence related to his life, most of our knowledge comes from the oral histories of the people who knew him. Buckner once told a friend that his father was white and his mother was enslaved, and she was sold from him when he was only 3 years old. He was trained in the art of cabinet making by a white craftsperson named Christian Stump. Born in Michigan, Stump was a Union veteran, and he settled in Sevier County in the years after the Civil War. He likely trained Buckner in the 1870s, and by 1880 both men were listed as independent cabinet makers in the U.S. Census. Sevier County lies on the border between East Tennessee and western North Carolina, and today it is considered a scenic gateway to the Great Smoky Mountains. At the end of the 19th century, however, its mountainous terrain acted as a barrier, restricting the county's access to nearby material and financial resources, including the city of Knoxville. As a result, many Sevier Countyans, particularly its black citizens, were farmers, laborers, and eventually sharecroppers by the early 1900s. Buckner worked as a carpenter or carpenter his entire life. The timber from the mountains also served him, and he sourced his local materials from the nearby lumber mills. And like many other Tennessee cabinet makers, Buckner relied primarily on walnut, cherry, chestnut, and oak, as well as tulip poplar and yellow pine. Despite the prevalence of farming in Sevier County, Buckner was part of a community of black craftspeople in the area. They often used their skills to improve the conditions of their neighbors as well. Buckner and his fellow craftspeople collaborated on at least 2 churches in the areas, including the one you see here. These would have been important centers of black life in Sevier County. And it's important to note that during Reconstruction, Tennessee's government was largely controlled by ex-Confederates who passed a series of legislation aimed at restricting the voting rights of its black and poor white citizens. Even so, Buckner navigated this political minefield, and 2 years after this dresser was made, he was listed alongside 117 other black men in the county's enumeration of male voters in 1891. And despite the social and physical barriers he faced, Buckner gained a reputation in his own lifetime as a fine craftsperson. He made fine furniture for both black and white clients. The dresser in the State Museum's collection was commissioned by a prominent white farmer, and he lived with this farmer's family for nearly a year, making the dresser as part of a larger bedroom suite. Neighbors remember seeing him traveling with his bag of tools, including a foot-operated saw. And in design, the foundation of Buckner's work was largely inspired by the styles of Charles Eastlake and the aesthetic movement, which rose to popularity in the United States during the second half of the 19th century. And although Buckner's work relied on the many core ideas of the Eastlake design, which included a rectilinear form and carvings like you see here, he ignored the mantra of restrained ornamentation. Instead, he embraced the ornamentation of the aesthetic movement, and he incorporated his own stylistic flair of unique symbols and carvings, which later became his calling card. The dresser features many of these symbols, including flowers, leaves, shells, and even matching lanterns. But perhaps most interesting are the carvings which are featured prominently on the pediment of the dresser, which resemble 2 eggplants. Also known as guinea squash, eggplants were important parts of African American foodways in the southern United States. A possible reference to the family he was separated from as a young child, it could be suggested that this symbol is a physical representation of Buckner carving out a place for himself, both in Sevier County and in the larger profession of cabinet making. Using his skill and creativity, Buckner brought an international style and taste to an otherwise isolated community. He not only mastered the styles of Eastlake and the aesthetic movement, but he elevated his work as it was informed by his own life and experiences. Thank you.